Mara Vale, hot on the heels of the spider, suddenly knows what she has to do. "What I want from you is an opening," the spider had said, and now she's running flat out towards that tumescent monstrosity. Not for the first time, Mara silently curses the day that her path crossed with that of the web. They are, every last one of them, certifiably insane. At least she knew where she stood, working as an assassin for Pinto or as a bodyguard for Tortimus. Servitude, certainly, but at least it was predictable. At least Lynn was by her side. The stray thought has bubbled up before she has time to suppress it, and in that instant her rigid self-control cracks. A wave of grief, rage, and horrifying loneliness surges through her, threatening to overwhelm her completely. Instead, something inside her flips, embracing that emotion. She channels the intensity, wielding it like the razor-keen blade that she holds. She puts on an extra burst of speed, passing the spider, and leaps, sword raised. Time seems to slow as she descends, the shining longsword flipped into a two-fisted overhand grip. The primal scream that erupts from her is echoed by the demon's bellow of pain as the blade plunges into its blubbery, distended flesh and slices downwards. Foul fluids erupt from the wound, showering the warrior, but still she cuts, forcing the blade to open the wound still further. And the spider, without missing a stride, flings herself bodily into the opening that Mara has made. Hello and welcome to The Lone Adventurer, an actual play solo RPG podcast with me, Carl White. I will be your narrator, your game master, and your guide as we follow our heroes on their journey into the unknown. For this game, I will be using the Lone Adventurer role-playing game rule set, as well as a variety of other systems, tools, and tables as they take my fancy. A word of warning: the following scenes may contain mature themes and disturbing imagery. Listener discretion is advised. The adventure continues. Last time on The Lone Adventurer, Valerian found himself facing not only a murderous cadre of Unseen, but his erstwhile ally, Barbican. Mina's control of the automaton had been usurped by the Doomspire Avatar's machine intelligence, and only Mina's desperate wrestling back of that control saved the pair from utter disaster. It seems that they have succeeded in their mission, but will that prove true for the rest of the crew? As above, so below. Last time, I briefly explored this story's ability to serve as a platform for self-examination and processing. This time, I extend that same opportunity to one of my characters, recognizing, of course, that in part I might well be talking about myself. I envisaged this opening scene as Mara making the opening the spider had requested, and rolled a yes and. I had the opportunity here to consult the Deep Oracle to see what the and might be, but an immediate idea occurred to me, and so in the spirit of avoiding card draws or dice rolls where instinct will provide, I went with my gut. And what my gut said was that Mara was like a tightly coiled spring at the best of times, but doubly so since the death of her sister. She had allowed herself no time to come to terms with the trauma that she had experienced, and it was now about to break through. If I'd rolled a yes but, I might have painted that in a negative light, but my yes and gave me the permission to make it a positive thing, both for Mara herself and for the progression of the story. Not only was this a cathartic moment for her, but she was able to form the opening that the spider needed without risk, and therefore without a further roll. I mentioned last chapter that early on in this series I'd had a preconceived map of how the episodes might play out, with 2 episodes at a time devoted to each of my various teams. That plan, as plans are wont to do, lasted exactly as long as first contact with the enemy. Instead, I find myself starting each new episode thinking less about overall structure and far more about who do I feel we should focus on now. This act of letting go, of focusing solely on the now rather than on the future shape of my story, serves an important purpose. By softening my control and allowing myself to go where the flow takes me, everything becomes more wondrous. By abandoning preconceived notions of form or content, I am able to experience the enjoyment of the tale as it emerges, and the story, at least in my opinion, is all the better for it. This sense of dancing in the moment, rather than planning and constructing, also dramatically reduces the cognitive load on me, as a player and as a GM. Everything just becomes easier. These are lessons I learned a long time ago with regard to both my play and my work, but it's remarkable how easy those lessons are to forget if you're not paying attention. Internal and external stresses can push us out of that place of calmness, relaxation, and judgment-free curiosity, which are all so important for any creative act. It can take an intentional act of recalibration to bring us back to our center. All of which is to say, I'm finding myself immensely enjoying the sense of freedom that I'm feeling in my story at the present. I'm not worrying about what's next or where it's going, and that seems to be helping with getting there. How does that mesh with my intention to contract my story scope and avoid further sprawl, I hear you ask? Well, that is quite an astute question. Thanks for asking it. My sense is that, kept at a conscious level, it doesn't really mesh at all. If I attempt to force a pattern of contraction onto my tale with my rational mind, that will create precisely the sort of cognitive load and pressure that I recognize gets in the way of the sort of flow state that makes engaging in this activity both wondrous and easy. But perhaps that intention, now stated and accepted, can exist from here on out at a deeper, more subconscious layer of awareness. It will emerge naturally as I play, because so much of solo play relates to subconscious interpretation. As ever on this journey, we shall just have to wait and see where chance and instinct lead us. The spider is considered to a fault. Careful and deliberate planning are her modus operandi, the absolute core of her being. They are her greatest strength. Foes more powerful than her by far have fallen, time and time again, to her unerring ability to predict their actions and plan accordingly. She assesses, she anticipates, and she mitigates. Faced with insurmountable odds, she outprepares, circumvents, and outthinks, be her goal infiltration, subversion, or extraction. This is what she does, who she is. And so it comes both as an unexpected thrill and a source of absolute terror to find herself in this moment operating entirely upon instinct. No safety net, no backup plan, just raw gut reaction. Of course, there had been plenty of preparation. The securing of the Heart of Ankara had been the first critical step in her plan to tackle Setaera, and the use of that artifact to corrupt its source of power had been the direct result of a series of informed assumptions that had proved, as so often, to be quite accurate. But this mad, direct assault is something altogether different. This is action based wholly on hope rather than the logic upon which she normally depends. In more ways than one, she is in utterly alien territory. She is inside a demon. infiltration of a wholly new and utterly repugnant nature. She half crawls, half swims into the foul, fetid innards, breath held, eyes tight shut, slicing a path through the more unyielding viscera with twin stiletto blades. Glistening muscle, freshly formed, contracts obscenely in response to her intrusion, spasming as fresh gouts of flesh erupt around her. She shuts out the horror, her mind laser-focused. She has one goal only: to penetrate as far inside as she possibly can. Already she can feel her lungs burning, protesting at this combination of extreme exertion and lack of oxygen. Those areas of exposed skin, her hands and face, burn also, seared by the demon's toxic bodily fluids. Just a little further. Her mind, unbidden, turns to Tatiana. There had always been an unspoken bond between them, her and the mysterious, haunted, dark-eyed girl who walked into her life those few short years ago. Though she loves the other members of the web like family, there is something deeper when it comes to Tatiana. From the moment they met, there has been a profound connection, forged at a level she has never quite been able to pinpoint or express. She cannot, will not leave the girl to this unspeakable, unholy fate. Tatiana has sacrificed everything to bring her and her companions back from the brink of death, and the spider will do no less in return. She can wait no longer. Her lungs screaming in agonized protest, her forward momentum finally arrested, and consciousness slipping from her grasp, she makes her play. Straining against the caustic, viscous fluids and organs that surround her and bind her, she pulls the reliquary from its hiding place, opens it, and pulls the heart of Ankra free. Our scene, envisaged as the spider using the heart of Ankra inside the demon, began as expected, but this time there was a but. I drew from the Deep Oracle and got the Knight of Wands and the King of Pentacles. The first of those meant energy, passion, and impulsiveness, and the suit of Wands suggested that this might be PC-related. I took that to mean that the spider was for once operating without any forward planning. This gambit was based on hope rather than logic. The second card referred to wealth, success, and leadership, and this time the suit of pentacles suggested that we were talking about a theme. I decided that taken together, this meant that the spider's atypical reliance on instinct was a positive move. I granted her advantage on her next roll. And that roll was a big one. She was going to try and use the heart to directly attack Setaera. This is why I love more narrative styles of games for solo, far more than I do the simulationist end of the game system spectrum. There are no stats for determining how much damage a Heart of Ankra might do when wielded within a demonic entity. No table to refer to for gauging resistance levels or saving throw target numbers to worry about. There is merely the roll and the logical narrative consequences of the roll outcome. I'm not going to jump the gun and spoil the outcome of this roll, we'll come to it soon enough. But I am going to take a moment to reflect on just how wonderful this point in the gameplay loop feels to me as a player. We have established a high-stakes situation. We have considered, at least to some extent, the potential consequences of success and failure. But we genuinely have no idea what is about to happen. Consider the possible outcomes. A failure here could well spell disaster for the spider. The heart is perhaps spent or ineffective, or the demon takes minimal damage. Trapped within its toxic form, damage to the spider would now be certain, and death really quite a likely possibility. A random GM move or two might determine exactly what went wrong. A partial success might result in the demon being wounded or further disabled, but with some sort of serious consequence for the spider. That consequence might take the form of a random GM move. A success? Fairly self-explanatory, and a critical success even more so. Things go well for the spider and poorly for Setaera. As you can see, there are quite a few potential directions the story might go from this point, particularly when we factor in the extra unpredictability of all those random GM moves. But wait, there's more. Because the next scene will start with yet another scene test, where I ask, does this scene begin as expected? And that additional layer of randomization, which becomes even greater when we consider that a deep oracle draw may be required to provide some form of clarification, means that there is a truly dizzying array of possible outcomes from this point. More than I, as a human, can realistically consider. So great is the level of unpredictability that I, as the player, have genuinely no idea which way things will go. The moment is charged with potential, steeped in uncertainty. Anything might happen. And that is what keeps bringing me back, that perpetual desire to stand on the brink of the precipice, to take one more risk, and find out where it takes me. It's a magical world, Hobbs, old buddy. Let's go exploring. She had expected devastation. After seeing what had happened to Setaera as the result of drinking sanctified blood, the spider had anticipated some sort of cataclysmic explosion that might result from revealing the jewel of the thrice blessed within the demon. That, or perhaps some terrible, vengeful fire, a blazing, excoriating aura rending the fiend apart from within. But that is not what happens. Instead of a violent, vengeful sphere erupting inside the creature, the first sign of change is gentle. A soft glimmer of pale, pure light emanates from the heart of Ankara, illuminating the horrors of the mutating demon's interior. And yet, bathed in that pale blue light, the horror seems to somehow dissipate. The spider finds she is no longer bound in place, that she can, in fact, move freely. The viscera that had been glutinous and impenetrable just a moment before, now parting effortlessly before her. The web of veins and arteries that had pumped black and yellow ichor have begun to flow clear. The growing light of the heart steadies into a slow, deliberate pulse that is echoed by her surroundings, almost as though the relic is becoming one with the corrupted flesh around her. In an expanding halo, the glow seems to integrate with the demon flesh, lacing through it subtly but surely, altering its very nature. As uncontrollable chaos gives way to structure and order, a path into the interior opens before her, a path that the spider feels powerless but to follow. With each step, she feels a sense of growing certainty. She starts to become aware of fragments being drawn slowly towards the light, the slightest sensations at first, mere glimpses or fleeting impressions, yet charged with tantalizing familiarity. As she goes deeper, the fragments multiply and coalesce. Memories, a growing sense of presence, something forming from the madness, something pure. And then they are facing one another. Granddaughter and grandchild. All is laid bare between them. There are no barriers, no secrets, only contact, forgiveness, and love. They stare into one another's eyes, Tatiana and Saskia Kamidev, Tatters and the spider, and they see one another clearly for the first time. They each reach out as one, their fingers touching. In that moment, they are one another. They are oblivious to the deconstruction manifesting all around them. unaware of the heart's light suffusing every aspect of the demon's essence, and of its gradual but inexorable dissolution. When the final fragments of the demon known as Setaera are finally banished, silently screaming all the way back to its own infernal realm, there is nothing to mark its passing from this world save 1,000 tiny motes of light, fading gently into nothing. The last of the blood pit spectators have long since fled. Down on the blood-soaked sands of the arena floor, only Mara Vale, sword resting upon one weary shoulder, remains to bear witness as the infernal horror dissipates, revealing at its heart the forms of Tatiana Kamedev and her granddaughter, the spider, wrapped tight in one another's arms. For the second episode in a row, things appear to have gone remarkably smoothly. I confess to finding myself on somewhat unfamiliar ground. Last time we had Mina and Valerian claw their way to victory in the safe-cracking mission, and this time it seems that the Spider and Mara have been just as successful in their own quest to rescue Tatters. That all came about, at least initially, from a successful roll plus scoundrel to activate the Heart of Ankara. But what came next turned out to be a bit of a surprise. I initially envisaged this scene as a purifying sphere growing within the demon and then wreaking horrible damage as it expanded outwards, but my scene start oracle had other ideas. To the point that when I asked the deep oracle for details, it responded with the Fool, which is about innocence, optimism and idealism, and the Eight of Pentacles, which is perseverance, routine and mastery. And in addition, the Eight of Pentacles was also one of my story list cards, relating to a campaign theme of solidarity. That all gave me a fair bit to unpack and interpret, but after just a little thought, meaning emerged. This was no caustic, violent act of destruction, but instead a gentle conversion, much more in keeping with the pacifist spirit of the Ankran monks. I checked to see if Tatters was saved in the process, giving myself likely odds because of their theme of solidarity, and I got a yes. Then I checked to see if Setaera's physical form was destroyed, and I got a yes and. A check-in with the Deep Oracle for some more detail provided me with the Wheel of Fortune reversed, which related to destiny, bad luck, and a turning point. And along with that, the Eight of Pentacles again, but this time reversed. In that orientation, it meant stagnation, procrastination, or boredom. That suggested for me that the demon was drawn back to hell, greatly weakened and trapped indefinitely. And so here we are, 2 for 2, with both teams racking up victories. That is good news for them, and also good news for me. I mentioned an episode or two back that I wanted to hand the task of story contraction over to my subconscious rather than forcing the issue. And I'm pleased to report that so far it seems to be performing its assigned duties remarkably well. Of course, as any share trader knows, past performance is not a reliable indicator of future results, and we still have a fair way to go. I should not be counting my chickens just yet. Crisis, calamity and cock-up are never overly distant, and we still have ample opportunity for things to go sliding suddenly sideways off the back of a single roll of the dice. Place your bets. It is the woman with the sword who brings Setaera back to himself. That brief flash of pain as her blade opens the wound in his steadily expanding flank. And it is well that she does. It doesn't bear thinking on what harm the older woman might have done had she penetrated his interior and released the power of that loathsome stone within him. Instead, in an act of supreme will, he seizes back control over his corporeal form, sloughing off superfluous flesh and stepping triumphant from the twitching ruins. He is upon the spider in a heartbeat, one clawed appendage clamping down upon her head and twisting. The head is torn from the body, as one might pull the wings from a fly, and then it is the turn of the sword wielder. He consumes her, slowly, savouring her screams. He crushes the vile stone, the heart of Ankra, to ruby powder between a contemptuous heel, and then reaches out, reasserting mental control. His people respond instantly, their panicked flight arrested, and turn to a new and dark purpose. They become his harbingers, agents of his profane will set loose upon the city. And his will is pain, desperation, and death. By the following dawn, Kairos is a city of blood and flame, a crucible of horror so profound that it bends and breaks the very essence of the chained world. The fabric, torn and desecrated beyond endurance, ruptures, and the barriers between this world and that of the demon hordes crumble. Creatures of nightmare flood into the world, spreading their contagion like locusts upon the earth. The ruination spreads to every last corner of the world, and none are spared the scouring that follows. And at the heart of it all, perched atop a blood-drenched throne crafted of the skulls of his victims, Setaera sits, surveying his works. The world echoes with the screams of the dying, and he is content. She is happy for them, of course she is. That Tachana and the spider have found one another again, despite seemingly insurmountable odds, should be cause for a celebration. Why, then, does she feel so saddened? Why are tears flowing down her cheeks? Why does she find herself on her knees, choking down sobs of grief and loss and pain? Lyn. Why couldn't it have been Lyn that came back? Through the tears, Maravale catches a glint of something. The ruby that has fallen unnoticed from the spider's fingers has rolled to a stop just in front of her. Picking it up, she imagines, just for a moment, that she glimpses blood and fire and horror within its depths. Gently tumbling motes of black ash captured within its many facets. Her breath catches in her chest. But no, on closer inspection, the heart of Ankra proves to be utterly unblemished, just as pure as it ever was. Indeed, there is something profoundly peaceful about it. She releases a long, shuddering breath and takes the first step on the long road to recovery. Well, once again, that was unexpected. I had imagined that scene kicking off as some sort of reconciliation dialogue between Tatters and the spider, and I gave that likely odds. But then I rolled double 2s on my scene dice, a straight no. That meant a trip to the Deep Oracle to figure out what was going on instead, and I drew the Fool and the Tower reversed. The Fool had only just come up in the last scene, and had related at that point to the heart of Ankra. It seemed logical that there was something going on with the gem again in this scene. The Tower reversed stumped me for a bit, though. That card relates to denial, avoidance, or delay. Well, what did that mean in this context? Rather than worry about it too much, I adopted a trick I often use in such situations. I set the game aside and spent no more time with my conundrum until I was drifting off to sleep that night. And in that relaxed state, the answer came to me almost at once in the form of a 1985 story by that perennial favourite of mine, Alan Moore, called For the Man Who Has Everything. In Moore's story, one of Superman's enemies gifts the Man of Steel a telepathic, plant-like object called the Black Mercy that attaches itself to its victim, feeding from their bio-aura. and in return it reads them and plays back their perfect fantasy reality, trapping them within their heart's desire. The heart of Ankara is an object of divine healing. It has the power to destroy the infernal, but what if that destruction were more benign in nature? More like the ostensibly kinder, subtle whisperings of the Black Mercy than the vengeful fire of something like the Ark of the Covenant. And so we have a slight retcon to Setaera's fate. Not only has the demon been banished, but it has no idea that it has been banished. From Setaera's perspective, it has everything it ever wanted. It has triumphed. It is supreme. Perhaps it could shrug the effect off. It just doesn't want to. And so now two threads are advanced. The demon is contained, and Tatters is freed. On top of that, the possibility exists that Mina and Valerian have dug up some useful dirt on the unseen. Things appear to be going pretty swimmingly for our extended party at the moment. How long can that last? Well, as anyone who has listened to more than a handful of episodes will know all too well, probably not very long. In fact, probably not very long at all. So let us bask in the warm glow of success for just a little longer, secure in the knowledge that, as with all things, this too shall pass. I look forward to seeing the nature of that passing next time. You have been listening to The Lone Adventurer, a solo RPG podcast played, written and performed by me, Carl White. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider telling your friends about it or leaving a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. It really is a huge help. You can follow me on BlueSky at theloneadventurer.bsky.social. Email me at theloneadv@gmail.com or follow my blog at carlillustration.wordpress.com. You can find show notes for this episode and all others at theloneadventurer.podbean.com, where I include any links mentioned in the episode, as well as mechanics information. I also include a link to a full episode transcript. The story will continue in the next episode of The Lone Adventurer. Thank you for listening.